Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back to our quiet corner. I'm so truly glad you are here with me today. Go ahead, pull up a comfortable chair, make yourself a warm cup of tea or coffee, and let's just take a deep breath together. Sometimes I look at the world we live in today, and it leaves me feeling a bit overwhelmed. Everything moves so fast. We live in an era of endless tapping. We tap away on our small smartphone screens. We send instant text messages, and we shoot off emails without a second thought. And if we make a mistake, well, it's simple, isn't it? We just hit the delete key. We press backspace. And just like that, with a tiny click, our words disappear into thin air. It's as if they never even existed. But it wasn't always like this. Some of you watching right now might remember a time when words carried a bit more weight. Many years ago, when I was just a young boy growing up, my grandfather handed me a heavy, dusty box. Inside was an old, manual Remington typewriter. It was a beautiful, clunky machine made of cold steel, black glossy paint, and a bit of old-world magic. When you wanted to say something on that machine, you couldn't just tap lightly. You had to press each key down with real purpose. Click, clack, click, and that heavy machine taught me the most valuable lesson of my entire life. It taught me a truth that I carry with me to this very day. Once you strike the key, and once you put ink to paper, you can never, ever take it back. Words have permanence. Today, I want to take you on a little journey down memory lane. I want to tell you a story about my grandfather, Arthur. He was a quiet man who spoke very little, but whose every single word was like gold. So, sit back, relax, and let me share this story with you. My grandfather, Arthur, was a small-town newspaper editor in a tiny, peaceful valley in Pennsylvania. He wasn't a loud man, nor was he someone who commanded attention when he walked into a room. He used to say that talk was cheap, but the truth was expensive. In his small home office, right next to a window that looked out onto the backyard, he kept the towering, heavy Royal typewriter. That machine was his pride and joy. It was his voice. One beautiful, golden spring afternoon, the sun was shining brightly, and the birds were singing outside. My grandmother, Martha, the sweetest, most patient woman you could ever meet, had spent the entire morning out in the dirt. She had been working hard, planting a small rose garden in the backyard. It was her favorite time of the year. After hours of digging, her hands were covered in soil, her cheeks were flushed from the sun, but her eyes were absolutely beaming with joy. She walked into Arthur's office, bringing the fresh scent of spring air with her. She looked at my grandfather, who was hunched deeply over his desk, his fingers furiously flying across the typewriter keys. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. She leaned against the doorframe, smiled warmly, and said, "Arthur, oh Arthur, you must come outside right now. Come look at the beautiful roses I just finished planting. They're the very first blooms of the year. They're just lovely." But Arthur didn't look up. You see, at that exact moment, he was in the middle of writing a very harsh, very angry editorial about the town mayor. He was deeply frustrated, stressed about his deadlines, and his mind was consumed by anger. Without even pausing his fingers, without turning his head to see his wife's excited, beautiful smile, he snapped. He shouted in a sharp, cold voice, "Martha, I'm incredibly busy. Why do you constantly bother me with something as small and pointless as flowers? Can't you see I'm doing important work here?" And then, sudden, heavy silence filled the entire room. Right at that moment, the typewriter made a loud, sharp ding, signaling the end of the line. That little bell sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. My grandmother's excited smile instantly fell. The joy in her eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, quiet hurt. She didn't yell back. She didn't argue. She didn't say a single word. She simply closed her mouth, turned around slowly, and walked back out into the hallway, leaving Arthur alone. Arthur sat there. He finished the sentence he was typing, but suddenly, all the satisfaction of his writing was completely gone. The anger he felt toward the mayor had vanished, replaced by a heavy, cold ache right in the center of his chest. He stared at the white sheet of paper resting in the typewriter. He looked at the words he had just typed, and then he looked at the empty doorway. He realized, with a wave of guilt, that he couldn't hit delete. He couldn't press a button to erase the harsh, ugly words he had just thrown at his wife. The words were already out there. They were alive in the air, floating between them, and they had already done their damage. He had deeply wounded the person he loved most in the world, just because he was having a bad moment. He tried to apologize later that evening at dinner, but as many of you know, an apology doesn't always heal a wound instantly. The house was quiet for days. It was a terrible, heartbreaking lesson for him. He realized that our tongues can be the most dangerous weapon we own. A few weeks passed by, and the tension had finally melted away. One evening, my grandfather called my mother into his office. She was just a teenage girl at the time, full of life, but sometimes quick to speak without thinking. Grandpa Arthur pointed to that heavy royal typewriter. He slid a crisp, clean, blank sheet of white paper into the roller. He looked at my mother and said, "My dear, I want you to sit down, and I want you to type out the meanest, harshest sentence you can possibly think of. Don't hold back." My mother was confused, but she sat down. She thought of a mean rumor she had heard at school, and with hesitant fingers, she typed it out. Click, clack, click, clack. The dark black ink bit into the clean paper. When she was finished, Grandpa Arthur nodded. "Now," he said, "take this rubber eraser, and I want you to erase those words completely. Make the paper look exactly like it did before you sat down." So, my mother took the eraser. She began to rub the paper. She rubbed harder and harder, trying to scrub the black ink away. But the ink wouldn't just disappear. The more she rubbed, the more the ink smeared. It created a dark, ugly, dirty smudge across the page. And eventually, because she was rubbing so hard, the paper ripped right down the middle. The page was completely ruined. Grandpa Arthur gently placed his wrinkled, weathered, warm hand on top of hers. He looked into her eyes with so much love, but with absolute seriousness, and he said, "My sweet child, I want you to remember this image for the rest of your life. This is exactly how your tongue works. Your words are just like the ink on this typewriter. Once they leave your mouth, they drop onto the heart of the person listening. You can say you're sorry. You can try to erase it. You can rub and scrub with apologies for years. But the dark smudge will always remain in their memory. And sometimes, if you speak too harshly, you will rip their heart completely, just like this paper. So before you let a word cross your lips, pause. Ask yourself, does it build up? Or does it tear down? Value every single word before it is spoken. That simple lesson changed my mother's life. And years later, when she passed that typewriter down to me, it changed mine too. My friends, as we get older and we look back at the long tapestry of our lives, we begin to realize just how many words we waste. We spend so much time complaining about the traffic, gossiping about people we barely know, or snapping at our spouses, our children, or our friends simply because we are tired, stressed, or having a bad day. But life is too short, and our loved ones are too precious to be wounded by careless words. If we can just learn to do what my grandfather learned to do, if we can just learn to pause, to breathe, and to count to 3 before we speak out of anger, we can save ourselves and the people around us from so much unnecessary heartache. So today, as we close our conversation, I want to leave you with a small challenge. Tomorrow, when you're talking to someone and you feel a wave of frustration or impatience rising up in your throat, just pause. Pretend you're sitting in front of that old, heavy steel typewriter. Remember that you are about to strike a key. Make sure that the words you choose to stamp onto the world are words of kindness, words of encouragement, and words that you will never, ever regret putting out into the universe. Thank you so much for sitting with me today and listening to this old memory. It truly means the world to me. If this story touched your heart, or if it reminded you of someone special in your life, please share this video with them today. Let's spread a little more kindness together. Don't forget to gently tap that like button and subscribe to our channel so we can share more stories like this. And please leave a comment down below. I read every single one of them. Tell me, what is a kind word that someone once said to you, perhaps years ago, that you have never forgotten? Until next time, my dear friends, take care of yourselves, speak gently to one another, and may God bless you. Bye-bye for now.